welcome to another Lawn Fawn video. Today we're going to be taking a look at our newest backdrop dies. We have the Puffy Cloud Backdrop Landscape. You can see that it cuts out those clouds right along the top, also with a stitching detail, but they stay connected on the sides to make a full background. We have the Puffy Cloud Backdrop Portrait, and then we also have the new Sparkle Backdrop with all those fun sparkle shapes in different sizes. I'm going to be making a card using each one of these backdrops in today's video. I'm starting out with the Puffy Cloud Backdrop Portrait, and I'm going to be remaking a card by Elena today. So I've cut this out of some Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I'm just going to ink up the entire background using some Ballet Slippers ink and my blending brush. You can see that that ink kind of gathers on those cut lines and defines those edges of those clouds for a really cool look. Once I've got it inked how I want it, I'm going to use the new Starry Sky stencil, and I'm going to tape that on from the back side, and I'm going to add the same ink over top. Just where the stencil is, that ink is going to be a little bit darker. So I'm using the same Ballet Slipper ink. It's just going to be inked up a little bit more through the stencil, and it gives this cool, subtle, starry sky look to the clouds. Once I have that inked up the way I want it, I can remove that stencil and you'll see this fun background that I've created with those stars. Now I'm going to work on the castle that she has on this card, and I'm using the new brick stencil to add brick detail to my castle that's cut from some mermaid cardstock. And I'm just using some mermaid ink as well, just for a very subtle tone-on-tone brick look. I'm going to go ahead and assemble my castle really quick here, and I'll show you how to put this together in the future video for the Build a Castle die. So I'm just doing this one really fast. You have these pieces that go on the top, and I've cut those out of the same cardstock. I just didn't ink them, so it gives a different colored look just because I have ink on one piece and no ink on the other. I've cut the door out of some white wood grain cardstock. I'm adding those little bitty handles to the door, and that door is cut to where it's hinged, so there's a score line so that door will open. And then I'm going to add all the tiny details that I've cut out to go on this castle. So I've got the little windows here, and then I'm just going to pop the inside. I've cut it from white for the border, and then I've also cut it from yellow for the inside. So I'm just going to pop out that middle and just pop it back into that white frame. And then I'm going to put the frame that goes on that opening at the top. And then I'm going to use a little piece of pearlescent vellum to go behind the window and give it this kind of shimmery look. I'm also adding some of the little banners. So here's that vellum. So it has a shimmery look in that window. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but it's really cool looking. And then I'm going to take some foam squares to pop up the towers on each side, just for some added dimension. Then I can finally add my door. And then I'm also going to add in a little pink heart in each of these banners. So now I can take that background that I made, now that I've kind of let it dry a little bit and that ink soak in, and I'm just going to add it to a standard size card. Now you do want to make sure that you don't put your adhesive right along the cloud lines if you're wanting to tuck things behind those clouds. So just keep that in mind when you're gluing this to your card base. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment at the bottom. This sentiment comes from the Tiny Fairy Tale stamp set. And then I'm going to glue my castle in by tucking it right behind those clouds at the bottom. So I'm just making sure it's nice and centered up and even before I stick it down. So now that my castle's in place, I can continue to decorate it with the little princess that's also from the Tiny Fairy Tale stamp set. I've got my little knight here, and I'm going to pop him up with some foam squares. I'm using the little fairies from Unicorn Picnic and the little sparkles, and then the moon is from all the clouds. So I'm just going to glue the moon directly to the background, and then for the fairy I'm going to add a little foam square and pop her up. And then for these little sparkles that I've die cut out, I'm just going to add some glue to the back. So I'm just adding a few of those just to sort of fill in a little bit. Now I can add a couple more of the embellishments that come with this castle. So it cuts out these little bitty flags, and I'm just adding those to the tops of my towers. And then there's a die that cuts out the flag that goes on top of it. So one piece will cut out the flag with the pole, and then one piece cuts out the flag that layers on top. So now I've got two little pink pennants on top of my castle. And then here is the finished card. Thanks for letting me remake your card, Elena. Now I'm going to make a landscape puffy cloud card. I'm going to do some inking along the top of these clouds. So in the first card I inked the whole background. In this one I'm going to use a piece of typing paper to just mask off the layers behind it. I've just tucked it behind that first layer of clouds, and then I'm going in with some tumbled glass distress ink to just ink the very top of the clouds. So you can see they're mostly white, and then they're going to have a little bit of a blue tint at the top. So I'm just working my way up the background, tucking that piece behind the clouds, and inking each layer. So once I get this last layer done, I'll just ink the top of it as well. I'm not too worried about the sides looking messy because I'm going to add a frame around this one eventually. But this is an easy way to make a whole bunch of clouds without having to cut a bunch of layers and glue them on top of each other. So it keeps your card nice and thin, but you still got that cloudy layered look. I'm going to adhere this down to my card base. I've gone around the outside edge, and then I'm going to go across, but I'm going to keep it towards the bottom of each cloud section. I don't want to glue the tops of my clouds down because I want to be able to tuck some things behind there. So just again, keep that in mind when you're gluing this to your card base. So I'm going to line that up with this standard size card base to create a landscape card. So I went ahead and I glued a frame on out of white, but I didn't think it stood out enough. So I'm just going to glue another frame right on top of the one that I had on there. And this one's cut from Pixie Dust Sparkle Cardstock. I think this one stands out a whole lot more than just the white did. Now I'm going to add some glitter details to my clouds. So I'm just going in with my glue tube and adding a little bit of glue to the curve of some of the clouds. I'm not even doing the whole way. I'm just doing a little bit, picking and choosing, skipping some, just so there's some variety. But this is just going to add a pretty glitter detail to the edges of my clouds. So I'm just using the Prisma glitter on the glue here to decorate the clouds. I'm shaking that on, and then I will shake it off into a coffee filter, and this will let me keep my glitter and pour it back into the container. I'm going to be using the little sparkle stamp set along with the unicorns from Unicorn Picnic. As you can see, they all match. I'm also using the sentiment from A Little Sparkle, so it says, "Hope your day sparkles." And I just love that these unicorns can be used together. So I'm just going to take all these that I've already colored and cut out, and I'm just going to decorate my card and tuck them behind those clouds. I'm going to add some foam squares to this little guy that's sitting down, and then I'm going to add this other unicorn at the top. So A Little Sparkle also has fairies in it, and so those fairies match. So I've got 4 different fairies when you add those 2 stamp sets together, and I'm just adding those fairies around. And then I'm going to go in with some sunflower ink and those little sparkly stamps and just add some embellishments and some sparkle around those unicorns and fairies. Once I've got all those sparkles stamped, I am actually going to go in with my glitter pen and add some glitter to the fairies. because you can never have enough glitter. And then there is the finished card, and I just think it's super cute, and I love that new cloud die. So for the last card, I'm going to be using the new Sparkle Backdrop, and I'm going to do some ink blending on it. So I'm using Distress ink for this one, and I'm going to do a very soft pastel rainbow. So I'm starting with some Spun Sugar Distress ink. And then I'm going to go in with some dried marigold, which is one of my favorite colors, but I just haven't used it very much lately. And I'm just going to go back and forth between the two till they're blended. Next, I'll pick some squeezed lemonade for my yellow. And I'm actually trying to make this a little more splotchy than I normally do, so I'm not trying to make an even line across it. I'm trying to give it a little more variation. Then I use some shabby shutters for the green, some tumbled glass for the blue, and then finally I'm going to use milled lavender for the purple. And I just thought that this had a really cool pastel look. And for me, I usually go bright, so I really like how this one turned out. So I wanted these sparkle openings to actually sparkle, so I'm going to layer this over some pixie dust glitter cardstock. So I'm adding liquid glue to the back of the die cut backdrop, and then I'm just going to layer that over top of that glitter cardstock, and then you can see the glitter shimmer through all those die cut openings. I'm going to add the whole panel to a card base. And then I'm going to start to decorate it. So I'm going to be using the Swan Soiree set to decorate this card. And I'm stamping out my sentiment on a die cut banner cut from some ballet slipper cardstock. And you can see that I'm stamping it kind of towards the left. And that's because I wanted to shorten up my banner a little bit. So now that I've got it stamped and I know how long I want my banner, I'm going to put that die back on it and line it up and run it through again to cut the tail on the other end and make it a little bit shorter. I've got the pond from this stamp set stamped out in some kiddie pool ink and die cut, and I'm just going to put that on the background with some foam. I'm going to add some foam to my swans. And then I'm just going to tuck those cattails, which I colored purple to kind of go with my rainbow background. I'm just going to tuck those behind the pond on either side. Once I've got those in place on either side, sort of framing my little swans here, then I'm going to add my sentiment banner, and I'm just going to pop that up with some foam squares as well and layer that along the bottom, slightly overlapping the pond. And then to finish it off, I'm going to fill in some of that empty space above and below with some clear sequins for some extra sparkle. And here is the finished card with that sparkle backdrop. So now let's take a look at some other examples of cards by the design team using the new backdrops. Letitia used the Puffy Cloud portrait for a dreamy background for her dreamy castle. Grace also used the portrait puffy clouds, but inked them in such a way to create a sky at the top and the ground at the bottom, which is super cool. Kara actually cut them multiple times and stacked them to fill a slimline card with all these glittery clouds. Rebecca's simple white cloud background really make the images pop off the card. Elise actually cut the clouds apart and made them green and flipped them the other direction to create a fun tree canopy for her gnome scene. Tammy actually cut the clouds apart as well and layered them over an inked sparkle backdrop to set the scene for this fun unicorn picnic. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.